Imagine someone could transfer money from your banking application without even logging in. No username, no password, no verification. Sounds dangerous, right? That's exactly the problem Spring Security solves. Let's look at a simple Spring Boot controller. This endpoint returns a user account balance. Now imagine someone sends a request to this endpoint. Since there are no security, the request goes directly to the controller and immediately gets a response. No login is required, no user is verified, no permissions are checked, which means anyone can access sensitive data. Where is the security here? Right now, every request goes directly to the controller. That's dangerous because nobody is checking who is making the request. We need something that checks every request before it reaches our application. Think of it like a security guard standing at the entrance of a building. Before allowing someone inside, the guard checks who they are, verifies their identity, and determines whether they are allowed to enter. That's exactly what Spring Security does for your application. But how does Spring Security check every request? We already learned that requests should not directly reach our controller. So, Spring Security places something in between the request and the controller. This is called a filter. Think of it as a security checkpoint that inspects every incoming request. If the request passes the security checks, it is allowed to continue to the controller. But if the request fails the security checks, it gets rejected immediately. The most important thing to remember is that filters execute before your controller code runs. But Spring Security doesn't use just one filter. It uses multiple filters working together. This is called the security filter chain. I said Spring Security doesn't use a single filter. Instead, it uses multiple filters working together. This collection of filters is called the security filter chain. Every request must travel through this chain before it reaches your controller. If any filter decides the request is invalid, the request is stopped immediately. Only when all required checks pass does the request reach your application code. The most important thing to remember is that Spring Security performs its checks inside the security filter chain before your controller ever executes. Spring Security has many filters. Today we will focus on the most important ones. So, what is the first thing Spring Security checks? It asks a simple question: who are you? Authentication simply means proving who you are, usually by providing a username and password. Authorization happens after authentication. It determines what actions you are allowed to perform. Think about an airport. Showing your passport is authentication. Accessing the VIP lounge is authorization. In Spring Security, authentication comes first. Once your identity is verified, authorization decides whether you can access a particular resource. Remember this: authentication answers who are you, authorization answers what are you allowed to do. So far, we have learned what authentication is, but what actually happens when a user clicks login? Instead of directly reaching your application, the login request first goes to Spring Security. Spring Security now verifies whether the user is genuine. If the credentials are correct, the user is authenticated. Otherwise, the login request is rejected. Once the user is authenticated, how does Spring Security know what the user is allowed to do? For example, John has successfully logged in. But does logging in automatically mean John can do anything? Not necessarily. Different users have different permissions. An administrator may be allowed to delete users while a normal user cannot. Spring Security checks the user role before allowing access to protected resources. So that's why authentication verifies your identity, but authorization decides what you are allowed to do. Now let's put everything we have learned together and see the complete request flow. Every request starts from the client. Before reaching your application, the request enters the security filter chain. First, Spring Security verifies the user's identity through authentication. Then it checks whether the user has permissions to access the requested resource. Only after these checks pass does the request reach your controller, service, and database. This is the complete journey of a secure request in Spring Security. In the next video, we will implement this complete flow step by step using Spring Boot. Thanks for watching. If you found this video useful, consider subscribing for more content on Java, backend development, AI, and real world projects. See you in next video.